Hello and thank you for joining us. Today we're turning our minds to a subject near and dear to my heart, that of renovation, and we're joined today by none other than Stefan Schmied, the leader IMEA at LIXIL International. Stefan, thank you for joining us and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So look, I think the most obvious place to start with would be a relatively simple question, which is this concept of renovation. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to LIXIL? Where do you see the trends moving?
Everybody living in Dubai realized that there's a lot of renovation ongoing. So wherever you live in a building apartment who's maybe 25 years old on the Palm, you realize that all your neighbors start renovating. So I think there is clearly a trend away from the off-plan also to do a lot of renovation. So when you do a lot of renovation, it's mainly the private investor. So you have a lot of investors who basically try to catch up. So if you have a building, and normally in our region and also in Dubai, you have normally A, B, C types. They're all a bit the same. So that's where GROE actually comes in. Renovation needs to be quick. It's often dirty. It's time intensive. You don't want to disturb your neighbor too much. So basically from GROE, we have the right solutions. And we also basically enable you to make a quick renovation. Because first of all, availability is also very important. We could see currently during the turmoils we had. So we actually bring a lot to the table here in the region. But in summary, I think the renovation part is a very interesting and growing segment here in the region overall, especially Dubai. Yeah?
I want to come to this subject of timing in a second. But firstly, you mentioned this idea of solutions that have been built for the problems that the region is facing. Can you be a little bit more specific with me?
Yeah. So we face here in the region, obviously, water scarcity is always a topic. So what our products do is, of course, when you have a shower, right, in a hotel or somewhere, or also at your home, where do you normally see the effect? It's normally on your Diva bill. So what we basically provide is a shower experience with less water consumption. The same goes when you flush your toilet. So also there, we clearly the leader in terms of concealed cisterns, also something you don't see, where you can save a lot of water with double flush, dual flush, we call it. So there are many technologies actually that people don't see. So for us, it's also important as GROE, you see partially, but the big part of our technology and quality that we basically provide is the unseen part. And there also we call it the peace of mind, because when you put, let's say, 6 or 7 liters of water in your wall, you want to make sure you never have to open that thing for the next 25, 50 years. So that's where we come in. So this peace of mind in terms of having the right solution from a, let's say, sustainable perspective. And I think there is not just the water saving, it's also how it's manufactured. So using recycling materials, so LIXIL is very strong in that. So we also have doors and window sashes in aluminium. And for example, one of the only company who uses 100% recycled aluminium. And now comes the kicker, actually. We also can use that as a design part in our faucet. So we have the Allure Gravity Spark collection that we launched new. So also there we bring very interesting design elements in there. So there's a lot, let's say, interesting technologies that come up that actually help you to be sustainable, but you don't really see or you don't really realize ultimately.
I mean, you accused me of asking a broad first question, but there's a very broad answer. So you got I think you mentioned 2 different types of solutions there in particular. So for instance, you mentioned this idea of electric faucets, which is obviously a very important product for more commercial enterprises. And then you also mentioned products which perhaps are more useful for individuals, or as you mentioned, just getting my DWA bill down. And you've already sold me on that concept. How do you manage those 2 competing interests? Because the incentives are obviously different, whether you're talking about investors or commercial operators versus individuals when it comes to renovation.
Yes, very good question, because I think who's the decision maker? Who really supports you as an end user or also as a developer or when you want to renovate? Because normally people, they don't renovate often. It's also important to see in Europe, for example, a renovation cycle is maybe 20 years. I guess in the UK, Switzerland, the same. you basically don't want to touch your bathroom for the next 25 years. That's also how they look like normally. But here in this region, the renovation cycles are way shorter. So, for example, in India, renovation cycles are 5 to 7 years. So people renovate the bathroom every 5 to 7 years.
Why?
So it is really simple because the labor is quite cheap. And they change because you have this growing middle class here in this region. So they buy a starter home, then they're basically either going to upgrade, buy a bigger home, then they either sell the starter home. So the person who buys says, I renovate. Or they keep the starter home and rent it. So then they often also renovate. So we have their way faster renovation cycles. And also, for example, the Indian market is way faster in terms of designs, adoption of new designs. New technologies. Here is a bit slower. So the interesting part is who helps you to drive this renovation. And that's where basically Grohe works together with interior designers, with architects, with retail designers, who basically help you as an end user who's maybe not always familiar with the products. What's the technology in there? How has it been produced? What's the surface, for example? What's the material? Is the material safe or not? So how's the installation technology? Is it easy to install, or does it take days to basically install that thing? Other part is after sales. So how do you know when you buy a nice faucet that if something doesn't work, that there is an after sales there, or that you even probably get maintenance parts or spare parts? So this is quite a complex, quite an interesting business.
I want to tug on a thread that you just mentioned there a little bit, which is this idea that renovation almost seems tied to a bulging middle class growth. Are the two intrinsically connected? Do you see the sort of the growth of renovation is tied to the economic success of the region, of the GCC in particular?
Let's say here in the region, also for those who have been a while in Dubai, we saw the ups and downs. And we also saw in the recent turmoil, there was not a big movement in the market. If you go back 2008, that was a different point where you really could see there was a big movement in the market, which shows that people built their lives here, and so that means they owned property. So when you own property, as I said, you have these, of course, off-plan, which are a bit different, but you have for the retailer and also for the person who basically buys their villa or their apartments. So there's quite a lot of renovations going on and a lot of investments from private investors. And also for the investor, because as mentioned before, the comparison of the different apartments. So if you have let's say a tower, and I said you maybe have 4 types of apartments, if a certain amount already renovated, there's a pressure on the other units also to renovate, because you cannot get the rent or you cannot get basically the resale value of the property. And so they're investing into renovation. Basically, the payback you get is quite substantial.
That, I think, is connected to something you mentioned earlier, which is the fact that the renovation cycle is much shorter here than it might be elsewhere in the world. What other kind of facets or aspects of the GCC market differ globally?
It is very broad. So you have from, we call it cheap and cheerful, so you have the economic segment to the ultra luxury. So you have that nowhere as strong as in this region. Also, of course, Saudi, ultra luxury. India is one of our biggest luxury markets, interestingly, especially in the big cities. But also here in Dubai, UAE. That's why Grohe, as the market leader, we can leverage that also in the luxury segment. So what we see here, and what's very specific, also a bit different than to Europe, is that people are ready to invest. Also bathrooms are bigger here. If you look at villas and there's simply bigger bathrooms, they're also more diverse. So you have a master bedroom, then you have a bedroom for the kids, then you have maybe a bedroom for the maid. So you need different products. So I said for the maid it's probably a bit more economic, for the children it's probably a bit mid-level, and for the master bedroom, that's where the big investment happens. So also there, if you can work with one brand like Grohe along this, it's easy for the end user, it's also easy for the designer, it's also easy for the installer, because he knows how to install. But we often forget a key part when you design your bathroom is you need a contractor or you need an installer.
You mentioned much earlier this idea about technology as well. So can we return to that for a second? The smart renovation, smart products. I mean, the idea is quite interesting. You've put there is the fact that in one villa you can be selling 3 different types of product lines that you might not be doing in the West. How does that connect to the idea of technology, and where are you integrating technology across these product lines?
So in that perspective, we have a lot of behind the wall. So there is normally behind the wall like a concealed cistern, or for example, you have the wall outlet of a faucet. That's all behind the wall technology. So this behind the wall technology basically goes through all the bathrooms, even the kitchen. So you need a system, you need an understanding of the brand that delivers that to make sure that the installation technology is easy to handle. So I think that is important, the technology there. As well, technology, as we mentioned, water saving, so you must be sure there's on every draw-off point there is some water saving there. I can also we have Droplet. This is also a LIXIL company where you have, it's maybe as big as this mic, you put it on the entry supply pipe of your villa or your apartment, and it basically, with artificial intelligence, start measuring the water flows and the draw-off points. So it knows, this is a 4-liter flush, that's a toilet. Okay, this is a washing machine. This is your dishwasher. So or this is the shower. So it starts recognizing these water flows. So then it starts like saying, hey, how much water do you actually use? So we have all these very new evolving technologies on also how you as a private owner of a villa or of an apartment, or even if you do Airbnb or whatever, how can you manage basically the water flows? And ultimately it helps you to see a lot of people, maybe now it's summer, they maybe leave for a longer holiday, and we all know you forget to close the angle valve, or maybe your shut-off valve suddenly with water pressure here, which also varies. So that's also something. We have quite a variation in water pressure, so you need a product that holds. So if you, for example, buy a cheap shut-off valve, and you go on holiday, you normally see the effect when you come back from holiday. So our products, first of all, a set peace of mind, but then you also have this new technology that helps you to measure water flow and make sure if you have, for example, a leak, this Droplet gives you a nice signal on your phone, and you can take the necessary measures.
For LIXIL, I think the GCC market is the third largest. Sorry, not the GCC. The IMEA market is the third largest.
Yes.
Is that market driving any of these innovations? Like you spoke a lot there about water savings, for instance. Is that a particular need? I'm going to assume it is for this market. Is it driving those technologies?
It's quite balanced. So you have in Europe, it's more regulation from the Europeans. So there are certain warranty regulations. There's also clear regulations now against greenwashing. Often products from claim to have water saving, which they don't. So the UAE is now clearly following up on that, which is good for us as a manufacturer, because as I said, we basically stay simple and true as it stands behind on that book on our deliverables. So there is, in Europe it's more regulation driven. Here is really more market demand driven, as I explained. So for example, the evolving middle class, or we also have the luxury part. So we drive a lot also in the luxury design, what really works. So as the biggest market in terms of luxury, we have a lot to say also in the new spa range that we now have here in the region, on how the design looks, on how also the marketing is and how the go-to market is, our showrooms, our designers. So the region has quite a lot of impact.
I think this brings us quite naturally to a subject which we have to talk about, which is obviously that of sustainability. So sustainability can mean lots of different things. It could mean how the products are manufactured. It could mean how the products are used, etc. I want to kick off this part of our conversation with a simple question, which is some of the things you mentioned already, this idea about water-saving technology or about how the products are created, which could be a sustainable practice. Are these things because there is a market demand for sustainable products, or is it because it's nice to say that things are sustainable and it's more a lip service?
No, I would not say it's a lip service, because it's measurable. As I said, you can see the water usage on your bill. And also, if you're an operator of a hotel, there is a big, let's say, business in there to renovate basically shower heads, to renovate the aerators on the faucet, to renovate also the flushing systems. So it's not really lip service. Of course, here, and we have to be honest, here is always like, why is it so green out there? For sure not because we're great in water saving, but it's how you use the water. And so for us, it's just not the water saving part. I said it's also how we manufacture, how we recycle. Another good example within LIXIL is that we basically try to use as little as possible plastic in packaging. So when you buy anything, so there's a lot of plastic around it, we completely try to cut that out as good as possible. Also, if it costs us sometimes a bit more, but I think it goes through the whole value chain that we do, and it's actually a very strong mindset. I said the GROE, the 4 key principles, sustainability is one of it, next to design, quality, and technology. And I think it's again this unseen or unfelt impacts. As you said, is it there, is it not? Yes, it's there. And we also try to communicate that quite, let's say, clearly in the market. Yeah.
On this subject of water saving, let's get a little bit more specific here, especially on the consumer side. What kind of solutions are you guys working on to help tackle those problems in people's homes?
So I think next to the bathroom, we should also look at the kitchen because, yes, the bathroom uses most of the water, but there's also the kitchen. So there we have our water system that is like a box. You put it under your sink and it filters your water, it creates cold water, it creates bubbly water, so which on the one hand avoids you to carry for your wife probably all the water bottles.
No, I mean, I carry them.
So I have to carry them. So, it also avoids the whole plastic. Of course, plastic consumption from the water bottles, but it also helps you to actually have a always fresh, chilled, filtered water in your home. So there is that segment of the market.
This is already available?
That's already available, yes. So there are many, let's say, companies who offer reverse osmosis or filter systems. But ours is a basically integrated system. You have the trust of the brand, and it basically comes with the right faucet. So you have everything integrated in a faucet. So also design-wise, you just have one faucet. On the right side, you basically have the normal water. On the left side, you have a couple of buttons where you then have like your bubbly water, your fresh, chilled water. It's all possible these days.
I mean, this is a bit of a selfish question because maybe you guys should come and have a look at my bathroom. But do we see any of these trends in the luxury market moving downwards? I mean, often the luxury market in most industries leads the way, and then this stuff bleeds down further into other segments.
It's exactly the same. Automobile industry, you opened your window in early times, I still can remember. So now everything... I'm not going to reveal too much age. It's the same here. And what we also saw, for example, during COVID, electronic faucets, which was purely on the public toilets, was suddenly moving into the private home as well. So we had that as well. We also have, for example, the shower toilet. So here, cleaning with water in the region is very normal. It's very usual with the shut-off valve. But we also have our shower toilet, and LIXIL as a Japanese company, everybody knows the Japanese toilet. So also that is a technology that we start seeing more and more. And we also say, if you look, for example, the installed base, we then often say, yeah, but now you create an installed base that consumes water over the next X years. Yeah, if you save X, Y liter, you know what the impact is. So there's also a discussion, of course, we have, and we also can prove that. So for us, also, for example, in Saudi Arabia is extremely interesting market. As I said, they built all the big developments now. They also allow foreigners to hold properties. So there's also an investor related, not just a local market, external investor related market developing. So there's a lot of interesting stuff happening here in this mid-level segment, not just the luxury segment.
Bringing the conversation back to the initial topic here, which was around renovation. The concept of renovation, this is a true story. My wife had one of our bathrooms renovated last year. and effectively the entire bathroom got ripped out and everything was replaced, which was, I'm reveal, was a bit of a costly exercise. But does the idea of renovation actually require you to have every part changed? Because you're mentioning very specific points there. You mentioned the shower toilets, for instance, or new different toilets, different faucets. Can it just be specific parts? Could you just be renovating a specific aspect of a bathroom? And have you seen a difference in terms of, if that's true, more of these smaller style renovations which are only doing parts rather than wholesale?
Grohe is actually the market leader in the region. You often, the chance is quite high, I would say quite, I don't want to say percentages, but quite high that you already have a Grohe product. So for example, when you see the concealed system, you have a push plate. So if you want to make a simple renovation, you basically just exchange your push plate. You don't even need to open the wall. So for example, because normally you need to open the wall when you want to change the toilet or the shower. Same goes for the shower. Often our concealed shower behind the wall is already there. So you only need to change what's in front of the wall. So that is also what we explain. A lot of our specifiers that once you have the concealed part in the wall, is basically build and forget, peace of mind is great. You don't basically need to touch it for the next 25, 30, 40 years. And you only can basically renovate the in front part, because often what we also see, the ceramic is often still okay. Ceramic is white ceramic, it's still
It sounds
okay.
like you're putting me in a dangerous situation where we could get a small renovation every 5 years because it's now become much easier.
See, there you go. No, and it's true that when you start explaining also the designer and say, listen, you already have basically my system now in the wall. You just change the cover plate, you just change the shower arm and a different color, so a different color, different material, different surface. There you go. So you have a smaller renovation done. There are also newer technologies, because what's the biggest issue when you renovate? The tiles. So now you have to take out the tiles. So there is this the newer technologies where you actually don't need the tiles anymore, and you can make a very clean and quick renovation in 5 to 6 days. So full renovation. So we're also looking at these new technologies that exist, and there is as I said, the part of where Grohe and LIXIL really plays a role is that the showroom people and the designer, the retail designer, where you go, that they know how to explain you, and that also the installer is trained, because we should never forget when your wife probably goes online, looks, oh, I like the faucet, blah, blah, blah. Then you maybe go to the showroom and you pick something, and then somebody needs to install it. And if that someone is not trained or is not familiar with the brand, they often go like, no. With Grohe, it's normally like, yeah, we know Grohe, it's fine, we know how to install it, because we trained over the years so many installers, plumbers, contractors, MEPs, so they're familiar with that. So it also helps you to have a faster, more secure, let's say, renovation at one point.
So I think a nice place to bring this conversation wholesale to an end, because we talked a lot about the institutional side here, about bigger businesses and what renovation means to them, and how the advantages that they can have out of renovating and using some of these new technologies. Let's bring it back to the individuals here. We've done it a little bit already. I want to talk chiefly, and given what I've just said, it's a little bit humorous, the kind of mistakes that people might make when they're thinking about doing a renovation. What are they? What should people look out for? What are the pitfalls? Other than, I assume you're going to tell me buying a Grohe product is probably the way to go. Other than that, what should they be looking to do, and how should they be looking to tackle the problem?
So it I said, for the individual person, it's normally a hassle. That's why you have a lot of non-consumers. So a lot of people say, yeah, I'm not going to do that. I said, I maybe buy a new towel and a new, like little vase and little decorations. That has to do it. So where we see, I said, a big potential for us is getting these non-consumers to renovate. I said, it's actually not so hard, because to your point, first of all, you need to understand how is the what's behind the wall. You often don't know. How is the piping? How is the electricity set? Then you have to see, okay, when you open walls, you often are surprised, or even floors, what's below there, you won't believe it. So there is on this process, it's a very messy process. And what I said before is exactly this. It's the same process for the last 100 years. Not much changed. If you compare that to other industries like fast-moving consumer goods, it's a completely game changer. Building renovation is still like 100 years ago. Still. If you go to the US, for example, the materials are still the same. They still do like in the 50s. So here we're a bit more advanced than that. So there are ways to simplify that and then to secure the execution. That's then the most problem. As you said, you maybe go there, you have a nice designer, makes me a nice plan. I say, okay, good luck finding a contractor. Which contractor, for example, is somehow, let's say, certified? So there are a lot of ideas and concepts that in our industry now going around. It's not just us, it's everybody's thinking about that.
And not to put too fine a point on it, but the expectation, I think, in this region is the service is in most industries is normally phenomenal. And having been through it, that's not always necessarily true in this case.
You see a little pushback from my side on that. No, it's true. And that is for us more an opportunity than a challenge. Because if we as Grohe and LIXIL also has more products than just for sanitary. We also have kitchen, we have windows. So if we as market leader can come up with the good solution that makes your renovation speedy, you know what you pay for, because often you go like, oh, okay, fine, let's do it. And then it goes like, I need a week or two more because I couldn't fix this. Then certain products are not available. Then you have a delay, then it's very dirty. Then you go like, so if you can basically manage, as I said, that process that's the same for the last 100 years, basically, then you basically have a winning concept.
I wouldn't even describe this as disruptive. It more sounds like you're looking to unlock a whole new segment of consumers.
Yes. And I said, once you get that done, you will not renovate just every 20 years your bathroom. It's like, you know what? I don't like the walls anymore, or I don't know. Let's do it every 5 years. And the faster the renovation cycle, the more business we as a company can do.
Well, look, on that subject of fast-changing bathrooms in the future, Stefan, it only exists for me to thank you for your time today and for joining us on the show. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me.